Okay, we are live. So wherever you're tuning in from today, a really warm good evening or good morning, and welcome to this very special webinar in partnership with Film Market Hub's 2022 International English Language TV Pilot Contest. And with us today are the jury of this year's contest, three particularly exceptional humans whom I'm delighted to introduce. We have JOSIE CYRUS, who is development exec at Ink Factory Films. We have AADIP DESAI, who is a professional screenwriter. He's also a consultant at Roadmap Writers. And we have James CYRUS, who's also a professional screenwriter and the founder of Scribe Lounge in the UK. So welcome to you all. I'm just going to give you the floor for a minute and just, feel free to tell us a bit about yourselves. Can I welcome JOSIE?
Yes. Hi, everyone. As Rosalind said, I am a development exec at Ink Factory Films across film and TV. I'm in our LA office, which works hand in hand with our London office. Our company mainly look after the estates and all the book rights for the John le Carre novels, so very much so in the espionage thriller drama space. And before joining Ink Factory, I was with AMC Networks on the international TV side.
Amazing, Josie. And James, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you.
So I'm James CAPEL. I'm a screenwriter, a professional screenwriter over here in the UK, and I'm also the founder of Scribe Lounge, which is an online community platform, a free online community platform for screenwriters. So I talk about writing a lot when I should be writing instead. my profession.
And it's fantastic. If you don't know Scribe Lounge, do check it out. James is the greatest encourager of screenwriters and has a fantastic community for writers, not just in the UK, but all over. So do check out Scribe Lounge. And he is. And a very, very warm welcome to AADIP DESAI. AADIP, have I got your name right?
AADIP.
Please, AADIP DESAI.
You'll get it.
AADIP DESAI, really warm welcome. AADIP is also a professional screenwriter and also has his own community of writers. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm a television writer in Los Angeles, and my connection is that I'm a BAFTA Breakthrough US. So no one over here knows what it is, and over there everyone thinks it's great. I have written on 3 or 4 animated series and for Netflix, and I've written on the Goldbergs. I was staff writer on the Goldbergs, and I'm the LATV Writers Facebook group, which is 17,000 writers, and I'm a lot less positive than you, sir. But I keep it way too real. And then I work at Roadmap Writers as a director of brand management and marketing, and so I do like a million things at once. So
I don't know when you sleep, AADIP, but he's also a stand-up comedian and is a very funny man.
But I don't do it anymore because I can't stay awake long enough to go.
Oh, well, I feel like in the best company tonight, like it's such a privilege, and I know that everyone watching this will be feeling the same. So I want to crack on with the questions because I know we've only got a short time with you guys. So, so I guess the first question, 2 of you are actually working screenwriters, and Josie, you work with writers, and all of you have a lot of experience encouraging writers and, not just being writers, but sort of helping other writers. So I guess the one thing everyone really wants to know is what is it when, and especially being the jury of this contest, what's the number one thing you look for when reading a TV pilot? What's the sort of standout thing? Is it the voice? Is it story? Is it character? Is it plot? Or is it a sort of unique, mysterious combination of all those things? I'm just going to open that up to the floor. I know it's kind of a broad question, but who wants to kick off? Don't be too polite.
I can go. It's not one thing. If it were one thing, then this would be a much easier job. But it's all the things. And it's all the things coming at you in like a unified thing under one voice. And if any of that is sort of off kilter, it sort of just takes you out. And I know that sounds harsh, but that is how it is. And so I look for clarity, number one. Like if I'm going to reduce it down to one thing, it's like, do I understand what is going on? Do I know who the main character is? Do I know sort of what their journey is, what they want? And if I don't know those things in the first 3 to 5 pages, you're done. Like there's no coming back from that. So, you know, it's really important to establish those things.
I would
like, where are we in time? People like it would be in 1982. They don't tell us ever, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? You know,
it's all there in their heads, mind. It's all there.
It's getting that thing.
What's in your head is on the page.
Yeah, that's really hard.
I mean, I'm totally going to agree. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Josie, you go.
No.
I'm going to. I would totally agree. Clarity is. Oh, sorry. You jump in. I'm sorry.
Go for it.
Go for it, James. What comes to you, Josie?
James.
Okay, so yes, I'm going to totally agree. Clarity is really important, and I think I'm probably looking for. I think voice is massively important, and I think for me that comes down to nuance. I'm going to be looking for those details, those funny little in-betweeny bits, those choices that they make that's gonna capture, you know, our attention. And be surprising, basically. You know, I think if there's genre tropes, we want to hope that they're subverted in some way. I want to be surprised. I want my eyebrows to lift. I would love to sort of not be expecting what's coming next. But yeah, like AADIP said, it's everything all at once. It's all those things, I guess. I'm sure Josie, you'll be much more succinct than I will.
No. And I apologize for the slight lag, everyone, if that's happening.
Don't worry.
It is. But I do completely agree with what you've both said. I think it's finding someone who is both confident, is bringing something new to the kind of story that they want to tell. And I think that it feels like it's an unfair battle in a way, because it is rare in the kind of market where I feel like they want to be telling almost kind of similar stories, but being as bold as possible while being confident, I think, in writing is the best way.
So great. So we've got clarity, we've got the nuance, the surprising, and bold. Being bold.
No pressure. No pressure. All those things.
So that is fantastic. And I guess when reading scripts, and this can be taken in positive or negative ways, can't it? But like when reading scripts from emerging writers or new writers, are there any common mistakes that you find? Or equally, is there something that new writers have that kind of shouldn't be lost as they kind of progress in their craft? So let's try and take the positive and the kind of maybe any tips for common mistakes as well. So
I want to hear what Josie says, and I'm going to write them all down.
Yeah, totally. We'll be making notes.
I'm like, yes, what do you do?
I think this kind of goes back a little bit to the other question. I think new writers, I find, constantly are trying to please the person that they think is going to be reading. And the best way to do that is actually by being yourself. I think people get too caught up in what they think people want to read instead of writing what they want to write. And the most success I've seen from new writers is in things that they are really passionate about and stories that they feel they have a point of view on telling. So I think the biggest mistake, in my opinion, is writing for someone else instead of for yourself.
That's a great point. I would put it as, I see it a lot of people writing what they've seen on TV or what they've watched, not writing what they've lived or experienced, because they're probably not confident enough. They're going to go towards what they know works. You know, those images we have in our minds. That's where sort of stock dialogue tends to come from. You feel like you've heard it before because they've seen it on every show. We all have, and if they replace that with more of themselves, I think that's where the gold is. You know, and I think that comes hand in hand with mistakes-wise, sort of. I don't know if it's a mistake. It's sort of classic overwriting and things like that, and you know, tropes like sort of if anybody's waking up to an alarm clock in the opening scene, I mean, we need something new. We need to find a new way in because we know it's been done before. You've seen it before on TV, so can you switch things up? Can you subvert things? Can you sort of surprise us? And then one other thing that's quite big that I've been chatting about a lot recently with people is POV, is a clear perspective. Like you said, AADIP, like clarity. I want clarity on whose POV this is, particularly with like ensemble pieces. It's just knowing straight off the bat, who is my lead? All those classic questions that we talk about, you know, I want to know who they are, what they want, what's standing in their way, you know, what happens if they don't get it, all those classic things.
Yes.
I would love to see all that clarified in their clear POV, if possible.
Yeah. There's one thing, so many things. I have like 20 things that drive me crazy. But the worst are sort of like, for me, if the protagonist is too passive, if they don't make choices and their wins and losses aren't earned, I'm just like, what is that? You know, why do we care? Like, I'm always asking, why do we care about this story? And it can be a different thing for everybody, but there has to be something. And it can't just be, well, it's my real life and this is how it happened. And you're like, your life is boring, or you made your interesting life boring because you have no perspective. And we all do it, those autobiographical things, but it just like, and they paint, if they're writing about themselves, they always make the main character really like way too good, and they're not willing to like throw as much shit at them. And so that, for me, it's all about the protagonist and like really nailing that, like you were saying, because that's where the point of view comes from anyway.
I've had those conversations with people where it's autobiographical and we spend a lot of time separating their real life from TV drama and trying to separate the two. So if they're very much the protagonist in their own story, it's like, okay, well, we need to kind of prize it from your hands a little bit so that we can turn it into TV drama, because generally life is really boring, and that's why, you know, biopics are kind of the, you know, they have to be strung together, you know, it's you know, because nobody's life is just linear and beautiful and perfect, dramatic. So yeah, totally agree.
That's really, really great answers. Wow. Already learning so much. So I'm sure everyone is really appreciating this. In terms of like, and please be as honest as you want, like, I know we're all on a jury of a contest, but how useful is entering competitions if you are an emerging writer trying to get noticed, get out there? Also, what else should emerging writers be doing to try and get, you know, to try and get their work out there, to try and get feedback, to try and get to progress their careers, really? Any advice from any of you on that?
I'll kick things off. I'd say that competitions are clearly a great opportunity because of, you know, what you can gather from it. You know, at the end of it, obviously, sadly, we can't give the prizes to everybody, but this is one of the few competitions I've seen where there's a whole host of finalists, and I think that's really great because it gives people that confidence. Because ultimately, we're all just trying to gather up accolades and relationships, and we're just trying to build them up in a tiny little pot so that we can show the next person all the little relationships and accolades that we have in order to get the next person to read, you know, read our work and validate that we're good. And so I think competitions are a brilliant way of doing that, because if you place in any of these well-respected competitions, that doesn't mean to say, you know, do your research, guys, you're in safe hands if you're in this one, but then it stands you in really good stead. In terms of other things you can do, it's just, for me, it's building relationships, and you can do that online. You know, like AADIP uses Twitter really well and has kind of a really clear online presence, and so you can sort of, you could Google him and see, you know, everything that he's about, and that's really important. I think you could immediately see what type of person you're dealing with, and I think for people to be aware of themselves and how they connect to others, you know, if you're good at that, then you can build your networks and slowly kind of creep your way up the ladder. You know,
it kind of can feel that way, right? It can feel like a creep. I think that, like, you know, when the world comes back, like if we have like film festivals and those kind of things are great, because you go for a weekend and you come back with 20 new contacts, and then you just start developing them. But I think it's one thing to collect people, it's another to develop those relationships. And sometimes I'm even bad about it because I get caught up in the writing and I'm like, oh, I haven't talked to this person in like 6 months now. And I have to like give myself the permission to be like, don't worry, they don't hate you. Just email them and say, hey, and it's totally fine every time, right? But it's like always be writing and always be meeting people and making real connections, not just like schmoozing. Because I think that's just networking. Big N is no fun for anyone.
Humans first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Josie, do you have anything to add to that? Oh, we might come back to Josie. I think she's having a few internet problems. So,
I do want to say about contests though, like people put too much of their heart and soul into them, and they get too attached to the outcome of these things.
Yeah.
And I say, this is my take on it, so I can protect my heart. But like I use them as a deadline, and that's my only goal. Like hit the deadline.
100%.
And if I don't hit the deadline, then I have failed myself, but not in a way that I should hate. Next time, do better. But just get it in. Every time I've just said like I'm gonna hit the deadline, I got the thing. And every time I want this so badly, and I, never. There's some energy in it,
Absolutely.
That is such brilliant advice.
It's an exercise, isn't it? It's definitely an exercise, because obviously, and one thing that it isn't is an absolute ironclad reflection of your ability.
Right.
It might be that, somebody submits a fantastic script to this, but we just find that it's missing a couple of elements, but they have a rawness to them. They clearly have talent. They're clearly going somewhere. But for the sake of what we're trying to judge, we're trying to find all those pieces. It might not be there, and you don't want those people to be discouraged. Like you said, totally.
Right. That's a good point.
Going, because it is not necessarily a reflection on your talent. It just isn't, because we can't, otherwise everyone would win, and we can't do that.
Because if you can have a great voice, but you don't have the rest of it, like you don't have the structure and you don't have the ability to communicate like this character, and so you're like, oh, I see the potential in their point of view, but it's not coming together yet.
And I'm speaking as someone who has failed in every competition I have ever entered.
Oh yeah, me too.
Because I started as like very much a kind of character first, nuanced sort of writer with zero structure. So meandering through life with great detail and depth, but at the same time they weren't doing anything and there was no jeopardy.
Right.
So I hadn't learned that yet. I hadn't learned how to, like I said, prize apart the difference between TV drama and my life and how it works. And slowly I had to learn those things. And that's why competitions were never a success for me, but I was still able to use it, like you said, use it as a deadline. And it's still a positive thing, and still use it to kind of drive forward until those human connections that you're talking about slowly start to stack up, and you meet people and you see the whites of their eyes and they read your work and you can have proper conversations. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic advice. I think we're gonna I had some questions for Josie, but we'll just wait till see if she comes back a bit later. So I'm gonna kind of move on to a bit more specifically about talking about craft and character. You guys have both mentioned character and the importance of characters. Can I ask you, do you have a favorite character from a scripted drama? And along with that question, what advice would you give to writers in their work to create kind of bold, relatable, authentic characters?
And you're saying drama, not comedy, drama specifically? Or
sorry, just scripted content. It doesn't have to be drama, sorry. Yeah.
I mean, my favorite character was Hannibal Lecter. And it's for obvious reasons, because it's like, he's the ultimate bad guy, the worst person ever, who's incredibly charming, and you root for him, and you're like, how did you do that? I mean, you have Sir Anthony, but like even without that, it's like the character's so well developed in every way. Like there's such a deep mythology to that character that you could throw him into the MCU and he would chew those guys up, So that's how you know you have such a strong character. And people are surprised by that because I'm a comedy guy, but yeah, he's my favorite.
It's really good. Wow.
And do you know what? Do you know why? I think as well, because it links to exactly what I'm going to say, and it's the fascination between Hannibal Lecter is the contradiction and innate contradiction of being a crazed human eater and a charismatic, human. And I'm the same. So it made me think. I mean, I thought of loads of people, but the best example is probably Tony Soprano, because
that was my second one.
Yeah, for the same reason. It's that innate contradiction that is there, in that he's this person that's in this job, in this world. He's a lot of people looking at him to be this thing, and yet clearly we learn in the opening scene when we first meet him, he has some kind of inner tenderness that he does not know what to do with. He has absolutely no idea how to internalize it, how to work it out. That's why he's got to go to therapy, and even then he can't figure it out, and he's never going to figure it out. That's the beauty of it, and there are odds constantly. And I think that's the best thing that's the best thing in characters, is when they have that conflict, they have that kind of contradiction to their human behavior. They're pulling one way, but they're also pulling another. Their human nature is often pulling against the world they live in, or the setting, or the dilemma they have, or the journey they've got to go on, the quest they have, whatever. So totally.
And it's what you like. If you can, in the first scene, incredible. It's so hard to do, and I can't do it. I don't expect any of you to do it. But like, that's why that's such a masterful show, and that's why that show created a whole new brand of television. I think it's that opening scene that changed everything. It's like this dude in his robe chasing these birds, and it's like, what is wrong with this guy? Like, he's a mob boss? Oh God. And then you meet his mom and you're like, oh shit, it just gets worse and worse. And you're like, no wonder he has all this pathos. But
it's that humanism, it's that tenderness that, like you said with Hannibal Lecter, that's the little fishhook that pulls us in as humans to want to follow them, and to want to follow their decisions, to the point where you're watching The Sopranos and you're just shouting at the screen, just kill him. Morality's gone out the window.
Why are you waiting?
Just whack the guy. You're just there already, because
you've lost your empathy, and you're like, you've taken on his worst, quality.
Absolutely. It realigns your morality based on their kind of charisma, their own gravity. So we've given you two completely impossible characters, but that's who we're striving for, even as writers ourselves. That's exactly what we're striving for every time.
On the comedy side, like, you can, Fleabag is a great example of a great character, a female character that's like very different, very flawed, but in that opening scene you get a pretty good idea of who she is.
Or even The Office, you take either Ricky Gervais's version or Steve Carell's version. It's the same thing, isn't it? Because they have this driving ego that is just repellent in the real world, but that inner tenderness, that absolute desire to be loved and to be liked and respected, is just so gargantuan that it can never fail to be charming, and will keep going till the end of the earth, knowing full well they'll never achieve their goal.
And that's TV, right? You never actually will achieve, the character will never achieve that goal. And then if they do, then the show's done. And then
absolutely, totally.
Josie, do you have a favorite scripted character? We were just been talking about kind of bold, relatable, authentic characters. Or if you don't, what do you have anything to add to kind of how writers can really kind of create bold, relatable, authentic characters with conflict? We've been talking about conflict a lot somehow.
No, I think that's a great question. I think it's a tough one to answer. I feel like picking your favorite show or your favorite characters always feels like a kill your darlings kind of moment, right? Like, although I'm sure everything that's been said is genius, because these two, although having just met, are I probably just missed the best advice of what I've ever heard in my entire life. I'm sure you've all carried it. But no, I think the first person that comes to mind, and I think for a few reasons, not necessarily relatable, but I think nuance. Every time I think about a nuanced, difficult character, this one always comes to mind. Is probably Thomas Shelby from Peaky Blinders. And I think part of the reason I believe that, is because I think he's a tough one to pin down, but at the same time, everyone always seems to kind of understand what he's feeling and what he's going through. And I think there's a darkness to that character that, while people, for a lot of reasons, will not have been through everything he's been through, I think that there's a tether to the way that he feels so strongly about ambition and family and protection that feels like those things are universal, and you see all of them in him. And I think when you think about the kind of drama space or the thriller space, that's difficult to do. I think it is a tough thing to achieve, especially for a character like that. So again, not really an answer for relatability. I don't think I'll be running a crime family anytime soon, but I think it's someone that is, it does all those things in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, we said Hannibal Lecter and Tony Soprano, so you're just right.
Okay, great, perfect.
So you're in great company.
Yeah, we've all picked stuff like evil and tenderness, you know, and some sort of heart and family.
But
and they do relate if you can, you know, depending on your story. Even if you downgrade that to like just a domestic family, you can have, you know, you could have a matriarch or patriarch who runs their family in a similar way, even if, you know, they're not Thomas Shelby. You know, it's still those same contradictions can still apply. That kind of that detail and contradiction in their behavior. Yeah, it's wonderful.
And you can have it with positive too, like Leslie in Parks and Rec. Like, she has a very clear mission, a very clear point of view, but she makes so many mistakes because of her idealism, and that's delightful, you know. And so it can, like, that's why Abbott Elementary is so great. Like, these shows, like, people just love them because, like, in Ted Lasso, it's all these kind of very relatable, good humans who are just like doing the best they can. And I think that's the flip side of it too, where you can drive a show with that very easily.
Yeah, my mum always says that a negative is just a positive overdone. So that I like.
That's cool.
I really like that. Yeah,
you know, because you can be, if you're overly passionate about something, it can turn into something pretty negative, can't it? You can love someone to the point of mothering them, can't you?
Right. That's really insightful.
You can always kind of peel it back to something that begins with some kind of positivity that is just completely overcooked, you know.
That makes a lot
I think
of
what
sense.
we've established is that your mom's a genius.
Yeah.
I'd never live it down if she had. We'll be
Does she write? Does she write, James? Does your mum write?
She's merely my muse, that's all.
Good news.
Good, right, she should write.
Can I borrow her for a while?
Yeah. Right, she's had all the experiences that I channel in my work. I spend most of my professional life writing about her rather than about me. I haven't got to me yet, so I will later. You know, she's far more interesting.
I read about my mom in every single. She's in every script, by name even. Like she's wild. That's why.
Yeah, totally.
So let's talk about, okay, so, I mean, people are always saying to new writers, write what you know. How true is that? Should new writers write what they know? Or, you know, you do get emerging writers writing very kind of bold, big worlds, trying to get that as their first gig. I don't think there's any wrong or right answer, is there really? But I know it's a lot harder to get a sort of very ambitious world commissioned as your first piece, but it can happen. So can I ask this question to Josie first, because you're in development? What do you think? What do you look for from an emerging writer? And should they write what they know? Should it be a contained world, or can it be as big and dramatic and bold?
I think write what you know can be interpreted in a lot of ways. And I think most writers typically will take it as write something based off of your life or your life experiences or something big that's happened to you. But I don't think that always has to be the case. I think, especially just going back to your example of kind of bigger, ambitious worlds, you know, there are people who have been fantasy fans their entire life, right? Like, who have studied every major fantasy book, show, film series that has ever existed. And that too can be counted as something that you know, right? I think write what you feel like you've had an education of sorts in, and that can be a life experience, or it can be a genre, or it could be someone who's, let's say they spent 10 years traveling, right? Like it can be about cultures that you feel that you know. And I think what should come through, and I think what I'm looking for to come through, especially if it is an ambitious story and an ambitious piece, is both an authenticity and a confidence in that thing and in that space. And I think that can come through in a lot of ways. I think it can come through in a protagonist or a lead character that feels real and grounded, or it can come through in dialogue that feels like you just fall into it, right? It feels like a conversation that you can overhear. Or it can come through in the texture of a world that you've built, if that's in space, or if it's like a near-fi, right? I think it comes in, right? What you know, to me, feels like a knowledge base, right? And that's something that you can pull from in a lot of different spaces.
Beautiful. That's really right. So kind of like an intimacy, really, an intimacy with what you're writing about, a kind of that comes out the page.
Exactly.
And that intimacy will breed the confidence, right? Because you've thoroughly examined this person, this dilemma. And so when you see that in a writer right from the get, you're like, they have confidence in their story, and I have confidence that I'm in good hands. And that's something I know in good hands most of the time, like, and it's dangerous. It's like, I'm going to put in an hour to read this, and that hour is going to be an hour I will never get back. Like, you know, and so I want that hour to mean something, you know.
I've heard it said as, rather than write what you know about. And I try to stick to that, because it's kind of a mixture of all those things, isn't it? It's kind of your life experience, your imagination, and research. And I feel there's a way you can't create Peaky Blinders without that. You know what I mean? You be able to pull everything together. And it's kind of like you're trying to balance those things as if they were on scales, you know, and sometimes they're going to go really autobiographical, and other times they're going to go research heavy. But as long as you're the human in the middle, pulling it all together, then I think, you know, like you said, then we can be in the place where JOSIE said, where we trust you, and we kind of understand that you know this world because it's leading from something. Like J.K. Rowling never went to wizard school, but she went to school like we all did, and so it's about starting there with those sort of universal themes, and then working your way outwards there. You know, with something like Game of Thrones, you don't take on a battle, you don't take on what it is, you scale in and you look at human kind of contradictions and their kind of their small relationship battles, and you work outwards, you know, and you kind of do it that way. And I feel like that's how you can apply what you know to what you know about, I think.
Yeah. And I also think part of that too is, you know, when we talk about wanting to be surprised and wanting to see tropes subverted, I think in order to surprise us and in order to subvert the tropes, you have to know what they are, right? Like you can't reinvent the wheel if you've never seen a wheel before. So I think that's part of it too.
There's a lack of film and television literacy that I see across the board, like execs, writers, directors, like, you know, it's like you haven't seen The Godfather. Like, you don't know what The Godfather is. Just pitched me The Godfather, you know, and they have no idea. It's like, you know, like this show's on right now, you know, you just pitched me, you know, Foundation or whatever. I mean, I've had people pitch me adaptations that they don't have the rights to, of shows that have already been made off books. Like,
yeah, we need an awareness, definitely. That's a Deep's turn.
Hello, we're all back. We just had a little blip there. Can everyone hear? Okay.
Yes, I can hear.
So I think just what we were all talking about there is kind of that kind of famous Picasso quote, isn't it? You need to know the rules before you can break them like an artist. AADIP, back to you. Oh, I think we've lost AADIP for now. So, JOSIE, any other advice because you obviously get sent a lot of scripts from new writers, emerging writers. Any other advice in terms of like how to package material, how to, you know, when you're receiving projects from new writers, aside from the sort of craft and the voice, which we talked a bit about, what else stands out to you? What would enable you to put trust in a new writer to commission something when they haven't done it before? Is it that confidence, maturity of writing, or is there something else you look for?
I think it's a combination of, you know, a lot of the things that we've talked about already, and also can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. I think it's a combination
Yeah.
of a lot of the things that we've talked about already, and a bit of like a charm, I think, too, which again is a tough thing to task on someone, right? Like, we hire writers to write, not to charm us in the room, but at the same time, I think when you're talking about a project, or when you're telling us about what your vision for a potential series, right? Like, we want to buy into that just as much as you want us to buy into it. And I think we can feel the excitement as much as we can feel the nerves. And I think everyone gets nervous. It's not saying don't be nervous, because everyone will be nervous. It's an impossible ask of someone. But I think it's be excited, be nervous and excited. And you want the people that you're talking to fall in love with your idea as much as you are in love with it. And I think you know, the kind of passion and the knowledge base and the subversion, and just knowing that the thing that you have, the thing that you're talking about, is unique and you are the only person who can tell it. I think that is a huge part of the process.
Absolutely.
A question that writers tend to hate all the time is the why me question.
Yeah.
And I find that can be quite difficult, because but you want it to be baked into what your idea is, you know, so that when, like you said, you're in a room talking, or even if it's written down on paper, that personal perspective of your passion, the reason that this is so exciting or so unique, doesn't mean there has to be an exciting, necessarily explosive show. It's just that you're so passionate about what the guts of it are. It might be an event, it might be a relationship, it might be kind of I don't know, it could be a battle, it depends, but it's all about, you know, your passion and why it connects to you. And if you can bake it in, that's always ideal.
Yeah, I agree. I'm always let's say it's a writer you know, and then you read their work and you're like, where are you in I don't see any in this. Like, the voice that you have when I meet you, which is like delightful, charming, then it's lost in whatever you're trying to do. And I think that's really important, especially for those who are trying to get representation and also meet people like Josie to develop things. Like, they want to buy that you wrote this thing, because sometimes you're like, did you really write this? Because, you know, it's such a disconnect. So yeah, I mean, aren't you buying in as much as you're buying into the script?
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely, especially now, you know, the why this writer is such a big question in the market, just as much as, you know, anytime you go into pitch, a buyer is going to say, having come from a buyer, anytime you go into pitch, a buyer is going to say, well, why now? Why do I need to tell this story now? And I think that question has always been in the ether, but the question that is slowly, not even slowly, I think immediately on the rise is, okay, you've answered the why this story, but why this writer, right? Like, why this person over anyone else? And I think, as you're both saying, it needs to be baked into the project, I think, from the beginning. The writer should have a point of view on the story.
That's it. I mean, there is no doubt that we are in a saturated market and there's lots going on. There's so many places to pitch now. You know, on one hand, it's great opportunity, but on the other hand, it means that we have to work really hard. And I think writers now, I think you do have to think about your essence and what you're going to bring. And, you know, if you're worried because you grew up in a two-parent home and nothing really happened and your life was really boring and you're like, oh my God, I'm not special in any way. That's nonsense, because it comes down to, you've got to drill deeper down into detail to find your unique perspective on things. Perspective comes down to a lot of things. It's not necessarily having a flavorful life of events. It's just about baking in that perspective of yours and the way you see the world. Because I bet, Josie, those are the writers that really stand out when they come into the room or read their work, because they're not thinking about what they've seen on TV. They're giving you their perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really important that you show that you have insight on your own journey too, because when you come into the meeting and they go, tell us about yourself, they're not, you know, then you're out there and like on a blank page. You better have a way to fill that and have worked on that. So it's like coming up with that 1 to 2 minute pitch of who you are is really important. I think that's really good. advice, all of that.
Super. So I think we're going to shortly open up. So we've had some questions come in from the floor. So I'm going to start to loop those into this. Let's just see. So, okay, we've got a question. James mentioned having a clear point of view, but is it okay to change the point of view to different characters occasionally throughout the script, as long as it remains clear whose point of view it is? Very good question.
I think generally the answer is yes, at least for me. I think when we say clear point of view, and feel free to jump in, you two, or at least when I say clear point of view, I mean that the story itself needs to have a clear point of view. And I think you can play as much as you want with structure and characters and how we're following them and how you tell it. But you just need to make sure that the reader, and eventually, you know, if all things go well, the audience feel like they have an idea or some sense of what they're being guided towards, even if they don't know what the answer is.
Like, what's the overall point of view on this situation or this world? And then we're exploring the different flavors of that through the characters. And so, like, I mean, Lost is a great example, like Downton Abbey, like we shift perspective all the time, but we always know that there's a global point of view about what's going on.
Yeah.
And we always know as well, when talking about ensembles, we always know that there is someone who's just at the front who is kind of basically on the poster. And that applies to Lost, doesn't it? You know, there's always someone that's slightly front. So as long as we come into that story knowing that this is our lead perspective, so that we can pull back and everybody else basically pulls up so that they're level with everybody else. But we just know that essentially we're always going to come back to them as a through line. They're going to be that thread that is going to pull through, you know. So as long as you've got a gauge on that, like The Boys is a great example. Like, you know, we're following multiple people, but we know that Huey is there and he is our guy and he's going to pull us through, even though everybody else is so sort of bombastic and they've got great goals and wants and needs and all these things and contradictions. But it always comes back to Huey, no matter what, because he's the core that was set out at the beginning. When you set out your stall, we can then go on some mad journey with all of them, and they can absolutely shift.
Yeah, he's our every person. He's our every man, and we can identify with like loss and having people not understand your grieving process and or losing somebody to death or otherwise, and like we can all get on board with that. And so it's easy to like say, okay, Huey's a great way to bring us into this humongous world. But like you can't come in on like some of the other folks. You're like, oh no, I don't want to be in there at all.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too. I think when you're talking about complicated structures and bigger ensembles, like who you start with and who your guide is for the rest of the story is a really great thing to think about when you start to construct what that story is going to look like, because that's the person that everyone's going to look to for answers.
Yeah, great. Another question. At what point do you ever give up on a project you know is good, but after a couple of years of submitting to competitions is getting nowhere? So any advice on that? Do you park it? Do you persist?
Personally, I would always be working on something else too. You know, so once something's finished and I'm putting it out there and I'm putting it into competitions and I'm working on it, I will always be, that's for me, that's kind of finished, kind of, even if it's going to keep moving, I will always be working on something else, so that your new thing will then feed in what you learn in writing your new thing will feed into that old thing too. And yeah, there may come a point where if it's not getting any traction, then, you know, you've just got it as a great piece for your portfolio. So just take it, stick it in your back pocket, and write the next thing and see if you can take all the things that were good about it, put it in the next thing, try and kind of, you know, get ahead again and then and do the whole round again. But yeah, I appreciate this. It's almost like you need someone to just tell you something's finished and ultimately
It'll never happen.
it's art and it's yours. So how could we ever know? So sorry for the crap answer.
No, that's a really good answer.
It's really
Like
good.
that is a perfect answer for that, because
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, it's just like you will hit the wall on the one thing. So when you hit, it's not if, right? When you hit that wall, you go, all right, I hit that wall. I'm gonna go over here and work on this thing that I'm just sort of picking at, and there's no pressure over here.
I think also when it's
sorry.
Now after you, Josie.
Oh, great. The only thing that I would add to that, I think from the producer development exec standpoint, is you never know when something is going to have its time, right? Like there are shows that are on air now that people wrote 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? Like there's a new FX miniseries called Under the Banner of Heaven that Dustin Lance Black wrote, and that started out as a feature that was optioned, I think, in 2004, right? Like, and it just got made and came out now as a miniseries. So you never know. So I think the first part of the answer is know when something is finished is a great answer, right? And knowing when to move on to the next thing. But I think the other thing in the back of your mind is you never know when that piece will have its time, right? Like you might meet the right person, the right producer, the right exact 15 years after you wrote something that says, I'm really looking for something like this. And you're like, wait, I have that. And you know, I think just it's knowing when to move on, but at the same time, don't lose hope.
Yeah, I mean, look, Snow White and the Huntsman was sitting in a drawer and for years, and then sold for $3 million.
Yeah,
so that's just like, okay, yeah, all the shit in the drawer it could be a vault of money, and
exactly,
you just don't know, you know.
And I think, you know, I was going to say exactly the same thing about timing, Josie. I think it, you know, so often it's just the market, the project might be amazing, but the market isn't ready for it. And when it's a passion project, it's really hard to let go and say, no, but I must get this made. But actually, you know, there's all these ones when you're most passionate about, you have to like be able to just let go and go, you know what, I have to move on to something else. And, you know, and so I think timing is so often everything, isn't it? As much as the project itself.
100%. I had a script that wasn't the one that got me my agent. It was the one before it. So I did leave it. I chucked it in a drawer, didn't think about it. Then the new script that got me an agent, that started getting me meetings and work. And then whilst I was on this development roster of meeting wonderful people like Josie, I talked about it and it came out of my back pocket and ended up getting optioned and going into a development run, but it wasn't good enough at the time to get the agent. So, you know, it can come full circle, and that's sort of exactly what we're talking about. So even by putting it in your back pocket, it doesn't mean that it's over. It just means that you're definitely on the rung of being a writer, which is repetition.
But it's good to take it as far as you can. And so it's not like I that on a lot of things. I'm like, I can't figure it out. So I put it away because I can't figure it out. But other things you have figured out, you just haven't finished. And so just finish it in some way. And then if someone asks for it, you're like, it's not in great shape, but let me look at it again. You're like, oh, I'll do a little bit of a soft polish on it and send it. And then your like confidence is so much better than if you're just hanging on to one project all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Neil. We hope you feel encouraged by the responses there. So we're moving on to another question here. Okay, so another question is, perhaps this is a very generic question. I understand that we scriptwriters have to learn how to fit in the nose, like you've not been selected as a finalist, but how can we manage that? So I guess, how do we manage rejection? And what can we learn from that? So turning it onto a positive, very good question. Thank you.
That's why gin was invented, I think.
And boxing.
Just forget it. No, I wish I had a good answer for this. Hopefully James does.
I'm again, from the producer development exec perspective, I think rejection is part of the game, and it's a horrible part of it. It really is. And I think everyone kind of learns to deal with it their own way, but that's part of why it's really great to have other projects in your back pocket that you're working on. I think everyone has their favorite, right? It's like picking your favorite child. You're not supposed to do it, but you do. And I think it's just knowing when it's time to move on. It kind of is attached to that last question that we answered, I feel, but how to handle rejection. I don't know if it ever gets better. I feel like maybe that's a terrible way to say that, but I don't think it does.
I think you can help with your mindset. So if you're getting a no, if you're getting a rejection, it means you went for an opportunity.
That's right.
So you're already a step ahead of that person who didn't go for that opportunity, who didn't finish, who didn't enter that competition.
Exactly.
So I know a writer who, I'm going to quote her again, and she always laughs every time I quote her, but a writer called Lilith, she has this system where she says, in a year, I want to collect 100 no's. I want to collect 100 rejections, and I'm going to put them in a jar, and I know that I've gone for 100 things, and I'm not going to stop until I've filled my jar. And so for her to fill that jar, she has to go above and beyond. She has to go nuts. And what are the bets that in the time that she's filled that jar of no's, something has come off, something positive has happened, lots of positive things have happened, because these guys are right. We have to eat rejection for breakfast. It's no matter where you are in the rung. So it's all about knowing, like you said, leading, going back to Neil's question, it's about just, going through the motions, knowing that you just got to keep going, work on the next thing. And then ultimately, that they're probably all going to get rejected, but eventually something's going to stick. And that's the kind of sword we live by, I think.
Yeah. I also think it's worth.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I also think it's worth considering that sometimes a no isn't always a flat out no. It's either not right now or not this project. Sometimes you have to pass on a project, but you really like the writer. And I just think getting yourself and your name and your voice out there as much as possible is exactly what you want to be doing.
That's true. It takes a lot of bravery to put yourself out there, because I'd say 99% of people are never going to pursue their art in a real way like this. And so it's like, it really takes a lot of intestinal fortitude to be like, I'm going to get back up. I've been knocked down more than almost anyone I know, and I'm still alive. I call myself the cockroach, because I'm like, you can hit me with like a nuclear blast. Like, I can write a little more, And it's like, the way I figured out how to get up in the morning after a big rejection is like trying to separate myself from the outcome emotionally. So as soon as I submit to something, it's out of my head. I'm back into writing that other thing we're talking about, or writing a pitch for something, or coming new ideas. But like hanging on to this thing never helps. It just
and again, it's kind of acknowledging that each rejection is not necessarily a reflection on your ability as a writer, because I think or as a person or as a human.
Exactly.
Then we get into a wider thing as well, which is probably important to say, is that it's really important not to attach your own human happiness to your work and your career. We have to find a way to separate them, because if you start to attach your human worth to the judgment of your work, then we're in a bad way. God, I wouldn't get through each day. So it's really,
we've all done it, right?
I mean, it's obviously, rejections hurt. They always sting, no matter what. But I think, for you, AADIP, to find a way to keep going, it's because in here somewhere that actually I am good enough to do this, and the next project will do it.
Right. I just want to write. I like writing, and I just want to write the next thing that makes me happy. And I like when I pitch it to people and see their face, whether they're like, what the fuck is that? Or like I like that response. And so, I'm just going to keep pushing.
It's so true. Mindset is everything, isn't it? Because sometimes if our mindset is positioned for rejection, we could read a really positive email in a way that is because we're receiving rejection, so we're not seeing the positives. As Josie said, it might not just be no to the project. It's not necessarily no to you as a writer, but I think it's so important, especially in this world, to arm our minds, to protect our minds, not to go down that path, which we all can do. But
I give myself like 24 hours, 48 hours to be completely livid and hate everything and drink some whiskey and just, be like, I'm never going to do this again. This is this. And then I won't reply to whatever emails it is. If it's contentious, I won't reply. Emotionally, all those things. Right. I've calmed down and I'm like, no worries. I understand. Thank you. Great. Thank you for taking the time. Because those relationships, they will continue. An opportunity might open even 2 weeks later. You have no idea. So
like if they don't shut the door on you, and like folks like Josie are like, hey, this was not for us, but let us know when you have something new. That's a big win, right? Because they're like, they like you, they think that you're a good writer. It's just the project isn't a match for what they do. And
Exactly.
so, like,
Yes.
writers will get kind of down on themselves. They're like, oh, they didn't buy it. I'm like, you expect someone to buy your thing in the room when they have to pitch it up like 5 more levels? This is not knowing how the business works is also that's a big mistake that I think a lot of writers make.
Every single project I have in active development right now, the producer had rejected a previous pitch.
Right.
Wow. There you go. That says everything.
How it works.
Yeah. Isn't it? So I I pitched it and they go, no, that's awful. That's awful. You come back to when you have something that makes sense, and then I do, and then there you go. You don't think about it, because that door didn't shut. Absolutely.
And talking about the reading the email and seeing it as a negative, like we don't ever talk about how to handle success. Because you get so used to the no's that you're like, I'm just a no factory. And then you get like good things happen. You're like, that's just nothing. And then you're like, you can't. And then people go, you don't see what's happening, what's happening for real. Because you're just like, if I get happy, then I'm going to, then I'm going to be destroyed. And I think I don't know how to fix that, but it's something I see a lot.
You can apply that to these guys, because I think if you're someone that goes to apply for a lot of competitions and you're always a quarter finalist, but you're annoyed by that, it's like no, you are a consistent competition quarter finalist who has clearly got that your work is at a certain level.
Right.
That's telling you something. That's a massive positive. Obviously, your ambition is wanting you to push further, but yeah, you're totally right. We have to acknowledge where we're at in order to improve. Otherwise, you're just blindly sort of trying to get up the stairs.
Yeah, like I keep champagne in my refrigerator all times, and if I have a good call with an executive, I crack it. Like if I got someone to laugh on a Zoom, I crack it. I mean, I'm an alcoholic, but it's very like celebrating those little wins is really important. Don't put it on Twitter, please, God. Don't put all your stupid things on Twitter. But like celebrate at home and go, okay, I can keep doing this. This is giving me some energy to get through the rest of the week.
That's such great advice to celebrate the victories, small or large, because that is what is going to keep writers going, keep us going, all of us going, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Guys, you have given us an hour of your time, and it feels like it's flown by. I have so many more questions I want to ask, but I think we do need to begin to wrap this up. But we have just in sort of closing, is there any further advice you'd want to give? Obviously, there are people out there thinking about submitting this to this competition or other competitions. What advice would you give them? You're the jury. What are you looking for? What do you hope to find? Any advice in any or closing comments you want to make?
For me, I would just say you don't have to be perfect. Not looking for perfection. I'm just looking for honesty and some clarity. And I think there was a question in there somewhere that we perhaps didn't answer that was about hitting the marks. I'm not looking for everybody to hit all the marks. I'm looking for you to hit most of the marks, and then just have that voice, have that thing that is you. So honesty, absolutely. You do not have to be perfect.
Fantastic, thank you, James.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that completely, right? I think the kind of honesty and authenticity and boldness, I think, are the big ones that I'm looking forward to. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It really doesn't. I think if there's a voice in something that I read that I really love and respect, and it feels like it's an ambitious and unique take, but it needs some work, then great, because everything needs some work. So I think that's really it. Yeah.
Everybody gets notes. Aaron Sorkin gets notes. Chanda gets notes. They may get only a couple, but everybody gets notes no matter what. For me, this is a really like nuts and bolts kind of answer, but like don't have a ton of typos, and like make sure your formatting looks like a screenplay and is consistent, and embrace white space. These little things that are presentational are important. Like if you present a PowerPoint and it looks like garbage, people are gonna be like, I don't believe the words on the PowerPoint. But if it's slick and it looks professional, they're like, oh, you have some credibility. And I think it goes the same with a script, like you're disrespecting your reader by having 10 typos on page 1, you know, stuff like that. At least look at the first 10 pages and make sure they're free of typos. But, you know, have someone else read it, print it out, look at it, change the font, and then read it again, and you'll find all the things. And it's a lot of competitions. Like that's the first way they knock you out, is like if you have typos or you didn't follow the instructions, then you're out. Like, so follow the instructions. It's like that simple.
Great advice. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you so much, Josie, AADIP, and James. You've been absolutely fantastic. We're so thrilled to have you as a jury this year, and thank you for your time and all your great answers and advice. To those of you watching, do check out the calls page on the Film Market Hub website, where you can get more information about the TV contest. The early deadline is April the 21st, and the final deadline is May the 19th. We have some fantastic prizes. It's really, really mind-blowing prizes this year, including coaching with roadmap writers. There's a Script Compass Development Package prize. There's Scribe Lounge. James's community James has gifted us, the finalists, with a membership to Scribe Lounge. There is all sorts of prizes, as well as cash prizes for the winner. And you get your script read by the competition's executive partners. That is Bronze Studios, 11 Films, and 11th Hour Films. So check out the contest.
Pretty huge.
It's pretty cool. It's a really good contest. So do check us out.
Yeah, the prize that we're giving is a month of our Career Writer program, which is like, you can't even get into it right now. Like it's sold out through July. So you get to kind of jump the line. And I've taken it as like in my job, I had to like watch all the videos of that. And I was like, this is cheating. Like it's straight up giving someone all the keys to the kingdom right away.
Wow.
So it's pretty great.
Amazing. And thank you to Roadmap and Scribe Lounge and Josie as well, all of you. It's been really great. Yeah, we're excited to see. So please submit away. Maybe this is recorded, so it'll be on YouTube. So if you want to watch it again and remember the great tips that these guys gave, check it out and spread the word. And we look forward to reading your submissions, and best of luck, everyone. So I think that's a wrap, and thank you again to you three. You've been absolutely legendary.
Nice to meet you guys finally.
Yeah.
Yes,
Nice to see you, definitely.
Yeah.
We'll speak again soon. We'll wonderful material we've got.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Bye.